Welcome. I'm Mike Malcolm, and this is the first video in our Family Vacations with Autism and Special Needs series. In this video, we'll set the foundation for our understanding about some of the ways that autism and other special needs may impact family vacations. I need to call to mind before we go further into this video that all information included hereafter is not all-inclusive, and call to mind that no two representations of autism, and indeed most special needs, are exactly the same. We're all unique individuals, so they're gonna be unique representations. In that, there's variance between all of us. No matter what diagnosis you have, autism, whatever, even if it's not autism, all diagnoses have variance because we're all unique. Remember that as we go through this. And each person, as I've just said, is unique. Each family, because of that, is unique. And those needs and those situations are unique because of those unique individuals. So expect differences and expect to have to take those things into account with your own family, your friends, or whoever you're thinking about as you go through this, and even yourself. Ideas contained in this series are meant to help in getting the most out of vacations for everyone involved. That's the point. And to help you have some ideas and ways to be creative and have a stepping stone and a starting block for problem solving and getting the most out of those vacations. All right, let's get into it. Number one, routines. So routines for the average person can create doldrums or a vanilla background to life. Meanwhile, for those with ASD, routines are often a support system, a favorite comfy blanket. Frequently, those with autism find routines a support structure, a foundation for their lives. When changes are made to those foundations or supports, destabilization, often in the form of dysregulation, quickly follows. The dysregulation from changes in routine can lead to physical disruptions for an individual, such as headaches, nausea, sleep disruptions, and more. These possible very visible symptoms resulting in change in routine are often signs of an inward disruption. So when you see someone with dysregulation, they're having an inward problem, an interior problem that's manifesting outwardly. It's not a tantrum. They're suffering from confusion or muddling of thoughts, stress, anxiety, and the like. It's not a I want what I want. It's something else is going on and they don't know how to deal with. They're seeking an internal balance. Is the best way I can describe it at this time. Such impacts are difficult on the individual with autism, and understandably, they're difficult on the people around them as well. It can be easy to see how changes in daily routine by going on a vacation with so many differences from the norm can cause difficulties for an individual. This doesn't mean that they aren't looking forward to the vacation. They might really be looking forward to the vacation. They might be excited for the vacation, in fact. They might be really incredibly excited for the vacation and the adventure of that vacation. That doesn't mean that they're gonna not have that dysregulation from the changes in routine or other things that we may see along the way. They may in fact have higher highs than the average person from that vacation, but they may still have that dysregulation, and the vacation still can be enjoyed greatly by everyone. As long as the right actions are taken, it can improve that even more. It can reduce the dysregulation and the difficulties before they even occur, and we'll get into that later. Number two, unfamiliar places. Difficulties with unfamiliar places follow logically from changes in routine. Unfamiliar places are not part of the routine by definition. Another facet to those difficulties with unfamiliar places is not just the fact that they're non-routine places. It's the individual with autism may have difficulties with new events, new people, and we'll touch on those two shortly. Unfamiliar places carry with them a large amount of new inputs. It can be easy when arriving at a new place for an individual with autism, ASD, to experience an information overload. There's a lot of new information in the area, a lot of new sounds, a lot of new faces, new shapes, new textures, new temperatures, new feelings, etc. It's an information overload. It can result in increased anxiety, stress, fear, resulting in dysregulation, etc. And in some individuals, it may be harder to notice this change, the internal overstimulation, over-information overload. Especially, and sometimes though, there's a caveat to this. Sometimes in individuals with autism, if the location fits in with particular interest for the individual, you may see an inverse situation where they may experience increased excitability or a youthful enjoyment no matter their age. And that's not a bad thing. That's a great thing. I'm autistic and I might be a little biased on this, but I think the world needs more youthful enjoyment and excitability, and it's a beautiful thing when someone has that and hasn't lost it for anything. And too often we allow those things to be lost in the seriousness of life. And there is a point for seriousness, yes, but we need to get excited about things. Life is beautiful, and to hold on to that. And when a person with ASD, with autism, goes to certain places that fit with some of their keen interests, sometimes you may see that kind of super excitement. I'll call it for right now, where it's almost a return to youthfulness for those who aren't youthful anymore. And instead of an increase in stress, no matter what they might override any kind of stimuli in the environment that might normally disrupt them for that enjoyment of the situation. In addition to the plethora of sensory information, new places often carry with them new or unknown expectations, and these can be hard for individuals with autism if those things aren't explained beforehand. Even if it's fully updated for them, even if they are fully sort of in the loop about what's expected of them, it can be hard for them, to know what's fully expected even in the moment by people at the location, or what is expected of them. And there can be a lot of stress and anxiety about expectations, how to expect themselves to respond, how to expect other people to respond. And just as far as social expectations, normal, how to carry yourself, things like that. Not necessarily in social interactions, but just normal expectations. Which brings me to the third thing about the unfamiliar places, which is the social difficulties and social expectations, the unfamiliar social expectations. And social difficulties is a commonality in individuals with autism around maintaining normal societal expectations for social interaction. And when in an unfamiliar place, the previously mentioned large amount of information coming in, the unknown expectations, difficulties with expectations, remembering all the expectations, and the like, it can be difficult to process all of this and to maintain, or try and maintain if they are trying to fit in, even if they don't need to, to meet the social norms if that's what they're expected to do in that situation. And I don't think that individuals with autism should be required to meet all social norms. Maybe I'm biased. I am biased. But, and, there's social, and that has a level of difficulty with it, a level of stress when you're expected to act in ways that aren't normal for you. And when you're expected to be able to do things and restrain parts of yourself, restrain parts of your body and your mind that, it creates a level of difficulty for the individual. And it can be as simple as sometimes with day-to-day struggles, not knowing new people or what new people expect from you and how they'll react to you, to a lack of knowledge about general expectations for all individuals, including ourselves. Not having adequate information about what is expected socially, or not understanding social norms, or social expectations, and or difficulty processing how other people are perceiving themselves as an individual can compound these difficulties, especially on a vacation. Number 3, crowds. Sort of the pinnacle meeting point of large data input, sensory input, and social unknowns is crowds. Crowds have so many complexities, and unknowns by nature. There's entire science-based research fields dedicated just to crowd behavior and crowd mechanics and how other phenomenon match those of crowds and how crowds behave under certain situations. When there's entire fields of scientific research just on crowds and how science itself doesn't have a full understanding of crowds, when you're dealing with individuals who tend to overthink and get overstimulated very easily and tend to think about each data point of the unknown, and there's a lot of stress with a crowd potentially. And on top of that, there's a lot of additional unknown factors that come with crowds. There's the noise level, restricted personal space, and those two stand out particularly. The loud noises can be particularly difficult for a lot of individuals with autism. It can feel unpredictable, the loud noise. It can feel jarring. It can bring physical feeling with the audible sounds. And on top of that, certain sounds or tones can be sources of physical discomfort as well, and those might be present in a crowd in ways that an individual might not expect. And it's hard to expect what sounds may be present in a crowd that can cause that kind of overstimulation or sensitivity. And with that, personal space is very limited in a crowd. And for a lot of individuals with autism, there can be problems with touch. There can be problems with being in close proximity to other people. Not necessarily, sometimes yes, because of past experiences, but also sometimes just because of personal nature. Some individuals, just touch can be a problem. And for some, maybe it's a day-to-day thing, where some individuals, such as myself, some days touch is more of a difficulty than others, and other days touch is not a problem or not as problematic. And many autistic individuals need to move about for stimming, or need to move about for just other reasons, need to have that freedom of movement, and crowds don't usually allow that. And that makes it difficult for crowds, and crowds are a very big commonality on vacations, including, lines might be a crowd-like situation for some, and I'd like to include that in here too. So lines and crowds can be difficult in vacations. Which brings us on to let's move on to our next one on that one. Lack or limitation of familiar comforts. So, as I mentioned before, that, you know, schedule and having that structure can be a familiar comfort. There are other things that are familiar comforts for individuals with autism that almost sort of create, as I mentioned, that structure, that security, that foundation that help keep them going, almost like keep the machine behind the scenes well lubricated and running well. For a lot of individuals, not having these comforts can be frustrating or mildly annoying, and for even some individuals, for a lot of individuals, average individuals, not having certain comforts can be frustrating or mildly annoying. Picture leaving your cell phone in a hotel room. Yeah, you can go back to your hotel room and get your cell phone. It's frustrating, mildly annoying, but you'll get over it. However, for individuals on the autism spectrum, depending on where they are and what that comfort is, some comforts or structural pieces missing can cause large dysregulation and great difficulty. For some, leaving, say, noise canceling headphones somewhere could be drastic, or leaving a specific sensory stimulating device, like specific stimming object somewhere, might be catastrophic, because that might be a specific texture that helps calm them that they haven't been able to find somewhere else, or they might not have another copy of that object, and it might make it difficult for them to recover from dysregulation to near impossible. In that day, it may make it so that they enter into dysregulation, just because they don't have it. The primary difficulty around individuals with ASD not having access to their familiar comforts is, that easier entering into and harder recovering from dysregulation. When things aren't as they are normally, it causes stress and anxiety over this thing not being the normal structure. We've gone over this a few times already. I know I don't need to really, really go over it. And yeah, it can also be true for items. Like I've said, it can be true for items. It can be true for routines and places. It can also be true for people. It can be true. Separation anxiety is a common thing for individuals with ASD. Certain items or people can be familiar comforts and can help with recovery from dysregulation, and the lack of presence can cause stress or anxiety that can cause them to enter into dysregulation. And again, the scale of this and how easy it is depends on the individual and the object or person or place. And we'll talk about different things like this as we go throughout the series. There are often ways to bring many of these items, people, places with you on the trip, and sometimes it's not tangibly with you if it's a person or a place, but there are ways to potentially mitigate some of that dysregulation or help bring something that is a connection to that place or person that helps with dysregulation. And we'll talk about some of those tools and tips and tricks later on in this series. The core reason that lacking these limitations impacts individuals with ASD is knowing that there is a limitation. Sort of like if you don't have your phone, your main stress about not having your phone is, what if I need my phone? Well, you don't need your phone in the moment, but what if you need your phone? Just knowing that the comforts aren't there is a source of stress or worry for them. Now, I can't speak for non-autistic individuals in this, but from those I've talked to, it's a similar idea, but it's on a much smaller scale. When you don't have your phone, it's a small stress. You misplace your car keys, it's annoyance if you don't need them. But if you need them, it's a much larger stress. So put it in that perspective. Think of it as, you need your car keys and you've misplaced them. Well, you're going to get very stressed, but that's the kind of level of stress that a lot of autistic individuals experience when they've just misplaced an object. That is a source of regulation and comfort. It's that level of stress is the automatic baseline for not having that important object or important person or important thing. And that can make having that lack or limitation on those things difficult in a vacation. Food and drink. A common difficulty for families with autistic individuals is how few foods and drinks individuals with ASD will eat or drink. It's common to see limited diets, usually higher in sugars and fats. There's also usually specific shared traits among those foods that are consumed, flavor profiles, texture profiles. It depends on the individual. There may even be smell scent-based profiles, which are usually connected to flavor profiles. It's also common for individuals who are autistic to get fixations, which can sometimes change on a week-to-week basis or month-to-month basis, and sometimes change without warning at regular or irregular intervals. On a vacation, these factors can make it difficult to prepare for what family members will eat. And this is especially true with the fact that many individuals with autism, if things are out of balance, just won't eat. And it's not because they're trying to punish themselves or someone else. And they will sometimes go to the point of self-starvation, some individuals. And it's not, again, like I said, it's not because they're trying to punish somebody. They're not trying to be defiant. It's because of how tortuous or arduous it is to consume the things that don't meet what they're looking for. And to the point of extreme health consequences sometimes. And it can be because they're just not hungry. Because if the things are out of balance, suddenly they're just not hungry. And why would I eat if I'm already full? And it could be because the thing that's offered to them is something that when they go to eat it, it's like eating something very unpleasant. Like, for example, I'll give a brief example in this moment, and maybe I'll touch on more examples later in the series. But for example, certain textures of certain gluten-free flours, even when they're baked correctly and done well, for me, are akin to eating sand. The flavor can be great, but the texture is akin to putting a handful of sand in my mouth. And that might seem extreme, but that's how extreme it is texture-wise to my mouth. And it's not the same for other individuals. Even other individuals with autism might enjoy the texture of certain gluten-free flours. And there's some where I can stand them, and that's fine. But certain ones I can't. And knowing those differences as an adult, I know the differences, but other people might not. And as mentioned, it is extremely common for individuals with autism to be particular about the foods that they eat. Chief among the reasons of this is sensitivity to the qualities of foods, like I mentioned my example with certain gluten-free flours. By this I mean we're attentive to the textures, temperatures, spiciness, appearance of the food. Some individuals are very attentive to appearance, as some more normal people are attentive to appearance. Some autistic individuals don't care about appearance at all. They think it's redundant. Some individuals with autism might care about food touching very, very intently. If food is touching, they might not be willing to touch it, almost to the point of having to keep their food segregated on the plate by partitions. It can be very difficult to get individuals with autism to try new foods because of this. New visual appearances of foods, different plating techniques, changes in visual textures, and other factors related to food, and so on, can just make it all the more difficult to find food that someone will eat on a vacation. And even more than that, it makes it notoriously difficult for them just to like food. Well, new foods, and they get very stuck on foods. And when small changes to these qualities can impact the ability for someone to even stomach a dish. Having someone new prepare a dish that you love and they do something small can take it from a very enjoyable dish that you absolutely love to something that's just absolutely inedible, where it's arduous or uncomfortable to eat, to the point where you get sad or heartbroken over the food. as an individual with autism. Knowing this, it can be difficult. It isn't difficult, sorry, to see how going out to eat on vacation or even getting food to eat on vacation can be difficult, as, you know, it's not hard to see. And fear of the unknown and resultant anxieties can be crippling for individuals with autism, for individuals in general, especially individuals with autism. And, you know, that makes, again, compounds the trying new foods on vacation and finding foods that look slightly different but are the same or taste the same or similar and may even have the same texture difficult on vacation. So that can see why that's difficult, and compound that with the fact that individuals with autism, especially when they get focused on something they enjoy, it can make it hard to remember to do the things you need to do for your body. Now, that might sound strange, but individuals with autism, again, such as myself, when we are fixated on something we enjoy, such as having fun on vacation, we often forego our body's needs. Not because we intend to, not because we're like, oh, I'm having fun, I'm just not going to eat. Or I'm having fun, I'm not going to sleep. Or I'm having fun, I'm not going to go to the bathroom. It's because we just don't know that we're hungry. We don't know that we're thirsty. We don't know that we're tired. Why? Because we're fixated. Everything else disappears. If we're really into something and we're fixated, everything else disappears. And that includes hydration. And that can be a difficulty on vacation. Remembering to hydrate, remembering to eat. On top of the difficulty with finding foods that work with individuals with autism, and finding refreshment that is hydrating, that works with individual with autism. And so it's not hard at all to see how that can make food and drink difficult on vacation for those with autism. Strangers. People who you and your family don't know, and who don't know you and your family. They're everywhere on a vacation. And we'll talk about types of vacations later, so they're not on every vacation necessarily. And we'll talk about that in a later video. But, most vacations, people who are unknown are the surrounding social apparatus on a vacation. And they can be a large source of stress. Yes, I said social difficulties earlier. That ties into this. However, strangers as individuals is what I'm talking about here. And strangers can be a large source of stress in this day and age for all families. All families, strangers. There's, you just have to look at the news for what reasons, for even just too many reasons as to why strangers are reasons for anxiety. Beginning and entering into conversations with new people, not necessarily a bad thing. However, for individuals with autism, this can be extra laden with anxiety due to difficulty with small talk. If someone's expecting small talk, ooh boy. It's often hard to understand and or tolerate small talk, certain types of it, like talking about the weather. Unless there's a point to talking about the weather, it doesn't seem to have a purpose. If I don't care about sports, if it's a sport I don't care about, I'm gonna struggle with small talk about that sport. Or if I'm in a point where I don't care about a given sport in the moment, it's small talk about that sport is jarring, that kind of situation. It's additional stress and anxiety can come up from that kind of thing. Water cooler talk is difficulty and anxiety provoking and stressful, and just doesn't make sense. And there's unknowns that come from just social interactions to begin with, and a chunk of that can come from past experiences with people, common social responses to yourself, and common societal responses to individuals with ASD, and a lot of our quirks that we hopefully future generations of individuals with autism don't have to hide as much as my generation, millennials, and others have had to learn how to hide. And how many of us have learned how to either play the social game, or just do what they do and, bear the stigma for it. And for those of you who are autistic, just a brief moment, for those of you who are autistic and who just do you, I applaud you. That takes a lot of strength. There's a lot of social stigma that comes with autism-based social interactions. Sometimes direct insults, offhand comments that can be a little bit hurtful or very hurtful, sometimes uncalled for treatment. And we, autistics, can have social difficulties because of some of our shared qualities that can be misinterpreted. And that doesn't mean, I'm not saying that blame needs to go anywhere, that we are a victim somehow. Sometimes our autistic qualities are understandably misinterpreted, but it is a double-edged sword. That's probably the best way to put it. It's the qualities can be difficult to interpret, and sometimes the response to those qualities can be equally uncomfortable. And the general social interactions and reactions to individuals with ASD are difficult for us, as I've just said. And sometimes even for our families, the tendency to keep those with autism at arm's length, physically, socially, and otherwise, combined with sometimes unkind verbal treatment, potentially warranted or not, sometimes due to our blunt nature or other things, and our quirkiness, our ability to get excited, which I think is beautiful, and I know not everybody shares that feeling, unfortunately. And just the difficulties with being around other individuals can be difficult and emotionally strenuous when meeting new people. And additionally, when meeting new people, even just once, briefly, there's a lot of new sensory information. What do they look like? What do they sound like? How are they moving? How do they hold themselves? How are they taking this conversation? Are they happy to see me? Are they sad to see me? Are they positively receiving the fact that I'm autistic, or my autistic qualities, my autistic quirks? Am I handling this conversation well? Do they seem like I'm handling this conversation well? If they have a deodorant or a cologne or a perfume on, is it something that's pleasant or uncomfortable? Are they trying to touch me, and is that something I'm okay with? Etc. And some of these are factors that I recognize normal individuals have to think about as well, especially the touch factor. That's a very important question, but it's also pertinent for all individuals with autism in all situations. For all families, there's always a concern about safety of family members too, when out and about, especially these days, and it's amplified for families of kiddos with autism and for those with other special needs. And there's a potential for normal difficulties and heightened difficulties of noticing red flag social cues. Individuals with ASD don't always notice all social cues, and difficulties recognizing what to do in those situations. Difficulty recognizing what's okay to do at home, or say to family members, but not to people that you're not close or familiar with. Oversharing, what is too much, too little, or unsafe to talk about. Combining that with elopement. Vacations can be difficult with, interacting with strangers and people you just don't know, and even fear of people you don't know. So, yeah. The unknown. Winding down. New experiences can generate anxiety for the average person. Humans are known to be afraid of the unknown. Fear of the unknown, it's a common thing. Psychology. Basic psychology. Individuals with ASD are often prone to major anxiety or panic attacks, especially with new experiences. We've been over new things several times. Don't need to go over that again. Vacations are usually filled, overly so, with new experiences. Lots and lots and lots of unknowns. There can be knowns. You can plan things. You can do all of that. But we'll talk about those things. It's easy for the mind of an autistic individual and anyone with anxiety, and even those without, to run rampant with anxieties, with fears, with overthinking about unknowns. But especially those with autism, what's going to be expected of? What's going to be, what do you expect will happen? What to expect for level of volume, what to expect for, and these are unknowns mostly based on all of the previous things that we've talked about. But these unknowns, as I've said, we're going to talk about how to manage these things. And the unknowns themselves, the fact that they are unknown is a difficulty. And the quantity of unknowns can itself be dysregulating because of anxieties and the fluctuating level of unknowns. And where someone's at in regulation versus dysregulation can increase the fixation on unknowns. And that's important to note, which is about to bring us to the most important statement, which is not actually a difficulty. It's a fact. You know your family and yourself. So with all the difficulties that come up for families and individuals with autism, ASD, autism spectrum disorder, whether or not you agree with calling it a disorder, I'm not sure I do, but depends on the day I'm in as to whether or not I feel like this thing is a disorder or not. It's crucial to remember that you know your family. You're around yourself and your family every day, or nearly every day if you're someone who travels for work or things like that. There's a lot that you know or have learned from that time together. Don't forget that. You have knowledge about you, about your family, about how all of you work together, and that is incredibly important. That is a gift, a blessing, a tool, an asset that is crucial. And as we go through the rest of this series, will play a very integral part in how you prepare, how you work forward and get the most out of your vacation is by leaning on the fact that you know yourself and your family. You love your family. And you've known them for a long time. It may not always feel like it's been a long time, but it has. And you love them and you know them, and that's very important. With research and taking time to create a general plan, finding and bringing accommodations, noting activities, considering transportation, preparing for communication, considering possible sensory issues, recognizing dysregulation, dealing with the reality of your own stress. I'm assuming for all people who are leading or, any individual who's an adult on the vacation, focusing on the memories and the positives of the vacation, integrating communication, and separating that from preparing for communication, and taking time for a few additional items after your return can make immeasurable impacts on the vacation for individuals and families of individuals and friends of individuals with autism who are vacationing together, and other special needs. As we go through this series, I'm going to make sure to provide you with the knowledge and tools and fundamentals you need to have a wonderful vacation as an individual or a family of an individual or a friend of an individual with ASD or other special needs. So in the next video, we are going to talk about some pre-planning items, and we're also going to talk about some budgeting tactics. And I know budgeting is not particularly specific to individuals or families with ASD or special autism or other special needs, but it's helpful for everyone. So we're going to talk about some budgeting ideas, and we're going to talk about some pre-planning topics. So stick around. You don't want to miss it. Thank you for watching.